At 4:47 in the morning on March 14th, 1944, Corporal Anthony Romano lay in a shell crater 40 yards from German lines at Anzio Beach Head, Italy, watching 5 enemy spotters through a scope he had modified against direct orders. The spotters sat in a ruined farmhouse window, coordinates rolling off their lips into field radios, directing 88mm fire that had killed 11 Americans in the past 6 hours. Standard doctrine said take them one at a time. One shot, one spotter, 4 chances for the others to scatter and call in your position before you could work the bolt. Tony had a different idea, an illegal idea, one that could put him in front of a firing squad if it failed. In the next 90 seconds, he would break 3 regulations, violate the manual of arms, and fire a shot that should not exist. The German spotters would die before they understood what hit them. And the United States Army would spend 6 months trying to decide whether to hang him or promote him. But to understand those 90 seconds, you need to understand where they came from. A Brooklyn garage, a father's 6 words, and the moment a 22-year-old mechanic decided that saving lives mattered more than following rules. This is the story of innovation born in desperation, of a technique that would save 340 American lives, and of a man whose name was erased from every record buried under bureaucracy forgotten by history. His name was Anthony Romano. Born 1922, died 1991, buried in Queens under a headstone that says nothing about the war. Some heroes die loud. Tony Romano died the quietest of all. The Gowanus Canal in Red Hook, Brooklyn, smelled like diesel fuel and dead fish. On good days. On bad days, it smelled like the industrial heart of America burning itself out to keep the country running. Anthony Romano grew up 3 blocks from that canal in a neighborhood where every man over 16 worked the docks, or the shipyards, or did not eat. His father unloaded merchant vessels 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. His uncle Sal repaired ship engines in a garage that was more grease than floor. Tony learned early that if something was broken, you fixed it yourself. Waiting for the company to fix it meant you went hungry. Waiting for anyone meant weakness. At 14, he was modifying car engines in Uncle Sal's garage after school. Timing adjustments, carburetor tweaks, small changes that made big differences. He had what Uncle Sal called a feel for mechanical rhythm, an understanding of why things worked the way they did and how they could work better. Uncle Sal would watch him work, arms crossed, cigarette burning between his fingers. Never said much, just nodded when Tony got it right, grunted when he did not. One afternoon in the summer of 1938, Tony rebuilt a timing chain on a Ford Flathead in half the time it should have taken. Uncle Sal crushed out his cigarette and spoke 6 words Tony would carry for the rest of his life. Army teaches you follow manual. I teach you fix what's broken. Tony also had a temper, angry hands his mother called them. Fast, hard, ready to solve problems the Brooklyn way when words did not work. 3 fights before he turned 16. 1 suspension from school. The last fight was over his younger brother Marco, cornered by dock workers twice his size. Tony put one of them in the hospital. The other walked with a limp for 6 months. His mother sat him down that night at the kitchen table, looked at him with tired eyes that had seen too much of Brooklyn's rough edges. You got angry hands, Tony, but you also got a thinking brain. I don't know which one's going to ruin you first. December 7th, 1941, solved that question. Tony was 17 working on a carburetor in Uncle Sal's garage when someone ran in shouting about Pearl Harbor. They turned on the radio, listened to the crackling reports, watched Uncle Sal's face turn gray. 2 days later, Tony enlisted, lied about his age, said he was 18. The recruiter looked at him, looked at his hands, looked at the birth certificate Uncle Sal had helped doctor, and did not ask questions. The Army tested him, found he could shoot straight, handed him a Springfield 1903 rifle, made him a scout sniper, sent him to North Africa, then Sicily, then mainland Italy. By March 1944, he had been at Anzio for 7 weeks. The beachhead was a meat grinder. 32,000 men trapped in a pocket 6 miles deep, 16 miles wide. German artillery on the high ground raining shells down every hour of every day. The casualty rate was 38%, higher than anywhere else in Italy. Men died faster than they could be replaced. The spotters were the problem, German forward observers hidden in farmhouses, church steeples, tree lines. They watched Allied movements through binoculars and called coordinates to 88-millimeter batteries positioned in the hills. American snipers could take out one spotter, maybe two, before the others relocated. The Germans knew this. They positioned spotters in groups, betting that American doctrine, one shot, one target, would give the others time to escape. It worked. Tony watched men die because of those spotters. Private Tommy Ricci from Philadelphia blown apart by an 88 round while carrying ammunition. Sergeant Bill Cooper from Kansas killed by shrapnel while digging a foxhole. Corporal Eddie Garrett from Tennessee obliterated when a shell landed directly on his position while he slept. All three died because a German spotter in a window called in their location. Tony knew Ricci. They had shared rations 2 days before he died, talked about Philadelphia cheesesteaks. Cooper had loaned Tony a pair of dry socks, showed him photographs of Kansas wheat fields. Garrett taught him a card game from Memphis, could sing blues like nobody's business. Now they were gone, and more spotters sat in more windows, calling in more death. Standard doctrine said snipers engage one target at a time. Fire. Work the bolt. Reacquire. Fire again. The Springfield 1903 was a 5-round internal magazine bolt-action rifle. Accurate, reliable, slow. Between shots, a trained sniper needed 3 to 4 seconds to cycle the bolt, reacquire through the scope, and fire again. 4 seconds was enough time for a spotter to shout a warning, grab his radio, and disappear. 4 seconds meant the other spotters scattered like rats, and you had wasted your position for one kill. Tony watched it happen a dozen times. A sniper would drop one spotter, the others would vanish. 30 minutes later, they would reappear somewhere else, and the shells would start falling again. The math was brutal. 5 spotters in a window. Kill 1. The other 4 escape, relocate, and kill 10 Americans before the day ends. He brought this up to Lieutenant Marcus Shaw, his platoon leader. Shaw was a West Point graduate who believed the manual was gospel. 28 years old and already tired, already convinced that following the rules was the only thing keeping chaos at bay. "Sir, we need a different approach," Tony said. "Standard doctrine is not working." Shaw did not look up from his map. "You engage the primary target, Corporal. Then you displace. That's doctrine. By the time I displace, the other spotters are gone. They reposition, and we get shelled again." The Springfield is not designed for rapid fire. You want rapid fire, grab an M1 Garand. The Garand does not have the range, sir. Shaw finally looked at him, tired eyes and a young face. "Then follow doctrine, Corporal." Dismissed. Tony followed doctrine. He killed spotters one at a time. He displaced. The other spotters escaped. Men kept dying. On March 9th, a German artillery barrage hit a forward aid station. 14 wounded men died along with 2 medics. One of the medics was a kid from Boston named Samuel Cohen, 20 years old. Wrote letters to his mother every 3 days without fail. Sammy had been assigned to Tony's scout platoon in January. Combat medic, Jewish kid with a gap-toothed smile and hands too gentle for war. Their first meeting was over an infected cut. Tony had torn his hand open on barbed wire, ignored it for 3 days until the infection turned his fingers red and hot. Sammy found him trying to clean it with alcohol and dirty cloth. "You're lucky," Sammy said, cleaning the wound with steady hands. "Another day and you lose the fingers. Can't shoot without fingers. Can't shoot with an infection either." "Thanks, Doc." Sammy looked up, gap-toothed grin. "Not a doc yet, but I will be. After the war, medical school, open a practice in Boston." They became friends in the way men do when death is always close. Sammy wrote letters to his mother religiously, showed Tony photographs. His mother standing in front of a bakery. His younger sister, Rachel, 16, all curly hair and bright eyes. "She wants to be a teacher," Sammy said one night. "Smart as hell. Smarter than me anyway." Every patrol, every mission, Sammy had the same routine. He would find Tony, look him in the eye, ask the same question. "You good, Tony?" And Tony would give the same answer. "Always good, Doc." It became a ritual, a small piece of normal in a place that had forgotten what normal meant. March 9th, 1944. 11:30 in the morning. German artillery hit the forward aid station. Tony was 300 yards away when he heard the shells. The distinctive scream of 88s coming down. The explosions. He knew immediately what had been hit. He ran. The aid station was a converted farmhouse. Walls 2 feet thick. Supposed to be safe. The shells had collapsed the roof. set fire to what was left. Smoke poured from the windows like the building was breathing its last. Corporal Mike Henderson was dead before Tony got there, crushed under a fallen beam. Sammy was pinned, chest crushed by the same beam, still alive, still trying to breathe through lungs that did not work anymore. Tony lifted the beam, with adrenaline, strength born from panic, dragged Sammy clear of the fire, laid him on the ground, saw the blood, saw the way Sammy's chest was not moving right. Knew there was no fixing this. Sammy coughed. Blood came up, red and bright and wrong. His hand fumbled in his pocket, pulled out a letter, half written, blood-stained, tried to give it to Tony. "Finish it," Sammy whispered. Words barely there. Tell her I saved. 47. Tony took the letter. His vision blurred. "You're going to tell her yourself, Doc. Stay with me." Sammy smiled, gap-toothed, the same smile from that first day cleaning an infected hand. "You good, Tony?" Tony's throat closed. "Always good, Doc. Always good." Sammy's smile held for one more second. Then it faded. Then he was gone. Private Samuel Cohen died at 12:04 p.m. on March 9, 1944. 20 years old, never went to medical school, never opened that practice in Boston, never saw his sister Rachel graduate high school. Tony sat with the body for 20 minutes, just sitting, holding Sammy's hand, holding the half-written letter, reading the words through tears he did not remember, starting to cry. "Mom, I saved another one today. That makes 47 men I've kept alive since Onzio. 47 mothers who will see their sons again. I know you worry, but this is why I'm here. To make sure someone else's mother doesn't have to cry by." The letter ended mid-sentence. Tony folded it carefully, put it in his pocket, walked back to his foxhole, sat down with his Springfield across his lap. That night he made a decision. No more doctrine, no more following rules that got good men killed. No more watching friends die because American snipers needed 4 seconds to cycle a bolt. He was going to fix the problem. The Brooklyn way, the Uncle Sal way, build something better. Even if it meant breaking every rule, even if it meant court-martial, even if it meant dying in the attempt. Sammy had saved 47 men. Tony was going to save 48, or die trying. That night, Tony sat in his foxhole, unable to sleep, staring at his rifle, thinking about timing. The problem was not the rifle. The Springfield was accurate out to 800 yards. The problem was the bolt. Every time he cycled it, he lost 4 seconds. 4 seconds the spotters used to run. But what if he did not have to cycle the bolt? What if he could fire 5 rounds every round in the magazine before the spotters even registered the first shot? The idea violated physics. The Springfield was bolt action. You fired, worked the bolt to eject the spent casing and chamber a new round, then fired again. There was no mechanism for automatic fire, no gas system, no way around it, unless you changed the timing. Tony had grown up modifying engines. Engines were about timing, combustion, compression, exhaust. Change the timing and you changed performance. Rifles were the same, just combustion engines that shot lead instead of turning wheels. The Springfield's bolt locked into battery with 2 forward lugs. When you fired, gas pressure pushed the bullet down the barrel. The bolt stayed locked. After the bullet left, you manually worked the bolt. Pull back, eject casing, chamber new round, push forward, lock. But what if the gas pressure could work the bolt for you? Tony turned the idea over in his mind. Gas pressure. The Springfield was not designed to harness it, but gas was escaping from the barrel every time he fired. If he could redirect some of that gas backward, create a pressure wave that pushed the bolt open after the bullet left, he could cut the cycle time from 4 seconds to maybe half a second. It was insane. It violated the rifle's fundamental design. It would require drilling into the barrel, installing a gas port, rigging a piston system to push the bolt, modifying the trigger group to release the firing pin automatically when the bolt closed. It would take hours. It would void every regulation in the manual. If it failed, the rifle could blow up in his face. If it worked and anyone found out, he would face court-martial for destroying government property. And if he did nothing more, men would die. Tony pulled out his notebook, started sketching. Gas port here, piston here, Trigger spring tension calculated. He worked through the night. The physics made sense. The math worked. The question was whether he had the skill to make it real. He thought about Sammy, about 47 men saved, about a letter that would never be finished. He thought about Uncle Sal's 6 words: fix what's broken. By dawn, he had a plan. March 11th morning, intelligence briefing. Lieutenant Shaw stood in front of a map, pointed at a farmhouse marked in red 600 yards beyond the wire. 5 German spotters, Shaw said. They've called in 3 artillery strikes overnight. 6 killed, 11 wounded. We need them gone. Tony raised his hand. Shaw looked at him. Romano. Sir, 5 spotters in one position. Standard protocol, we engage one target and displace. The other 4 scatter. That's the reality of sniper operations, Corporal. Sir, what if there was a way to take all 5 before they scatter? Shaw's expression shifted. I'm listening. Tony chose his words carefully. If I could reduce bolt cycle time from 4 seconds to under 1 second, I could engage all 5 targets before they react to the first shot. The Springfield is bolt action Romano. There's no way to do that. Sir, with modifications to the gas system, I could turn it semi-automatic. Shaw cut him off. Modifications. You want to modify your rifle? Yes, sir. Long pause. The tent was quiet except for distant artillery. Corporal Romano, do you understand what you're suggesting? Yes, sir. You're suggesting unauthorized destruction of military property. You're suggesting a modification that could compromise weapon integrity. You're suggesting I approve something that could blow up in your face. Sir, I've calculated the physics. It will work. And if it doesn't, if the barrel explodes, if you kill yourself or the men around you. Tony met his eyes. Then court-martial me, sir. I watched Sammy Cohen die 5 days ago. He saved 47 men, died because we can't kill spotters fast enough. How many more Sammys before we try something different? Shaw was quiet for a long time, looked at the map, looked at Tony, looked at something only he could see. Finally, he spoke. I never had this conversation, Romano. Sir, I never approved anything. I never heard about modifications. If you do this and it works, don't tell me how. If it fails and you die, I'll write your mother a letter saying you died following doctrine. Clear, Karna. Crystal, sir. Shaw turned back to the map. That farmhouse. 5 spotters. They need to be gone by dawn tomorrow. Understood, sir. Shaw paused, did not turn around. Romano, don't blow yourself up. I hate writing letters to mothers. Tony walked out of that tent knowing 3 things. 1, he had less than 24 hours to modify a rifle in secret. 2, if it worked, he would save lives, but probably face court-martial anyway. 3, if it failed, his mother would get a letter full of the same lies he had written for Tommy and Bill and Eddie and Sammy. He was done with lies. If you served in World War II, or if your father or grandfather, did you know what it meant to see the impossible happen? To watch regulations bend under the weight of necessity. Many of you watching probably remember hearing stories like this around the dinner table. Stories of innovation, of men who thought differently. If you have those stories, share them in the comments. These memories matter. This history matters. And please hit that subscribe button. There is more to Tony Romano's story, much more. At 2:30 in the morning on March 12th, Tony worked in a supply tent near the beachhead perimeter. He had told the sentry he was cleaning his rifle. The sentry did not care. Nobody cared what you did at 2:30 in the morning as long as you did not make noise. He had the Springfield disassembled on a crate. Barrel bolt trigger group stock. Every piece laid out like an engine he was rebuilding in Uncle Sal's garage. The smell of gun oil filled the tent. Outside, distant rumble of artillery. The Germans fired harassment rounds at night just to keep everyone from sleeping. Tony worked by flashlight, his hands steady despite the cold. Step 1. Drill a gas port in the barrel. He had borrowed a hand drill from the engineers. The barrel was forged steel, hard as a ship's hull. He measured 6 inches from the chamber, marked the spot with a grease pencil, started drilling. The bits screeched against the metal, a sound like nails on slate. He drilled slowly, checking depth every few minutes. Too shallow and the guano would not vent. Too deep and he would weaken the barrel. Risk an explosion. 15 minutes. The drill bit punched through. He inspected the hole. Clean, 1/8 inch diameter. He blew metal shavings out and wiped the barrel down. Step 2. Fabricate a gas piston. He did not have a machine shop. He had a tent, a file, and scrap metal from a destroyed German half-track. He cut a piece of steel rod, filed it down until it fit in a tube he had fashioned from a broken radio antenna. The piston had to slide smoothly but seal tight. He tested it 20 times, filing and adjusting until the fit was perfect. His hands were black with grease. His fingers ached. He cut his thumb on a sharp edge and wrapped it with a strip of cloth torn from his undershirt. Step 3. Attach the piston system to the barrel. He used wire scavenged from communications equipment, wrapped it tight around the barrel to secure the gas tube. The tube ran from the valve port back toward the receiver, angled to catch escaping gas and push the piston. The piston connected to the bolt via a thin steel rod he had bent and filed. His hands cramped from the cold, but he kept working. Step 4. Modify the trigger group. This was the dangerous part. The trigger had to release automatically when the bolt closed so the rifle would fire again without him pulling the trigger. He filed down the sear, adjusted the hammer spring tension, tested the mechanism by hand. The hammer snapped forward with a sharp click. Too much tension and it would not reset. Too little and it might misfire. Or worse, slam fire. Detonate when a round chambered. Turn the rifle into a hand grenade. He adjusted, tested, adjusted again. 40 minutes of trial and error. His fingers cramping, his breath visible in the cold. By 4:15 in the morning, the rifle was reassembled. It looked almost normal. The gas tube was hidden along the barrel, camouflaged with mud and cloth wrapping. The internal modifications were invisible unless you disassembled the action. Tony held the rifle in his hands and felt the weight of what he had done. If this worked, he had created something that did not officially exist. If it failed, he had destroyed a piece of military equipment and risked his life on a theory. He thought about Sammy Cohen again, about the photographs of a kid sister Tony would never meet, about dying because you followed the rules. Tony loaded 5 rounds into the magazine, walked outside into the pre-dawn darkness, found a spot behind the supply tent where nobody would see him, aimed at a patch of dirt 40 yards away. He pulled the trigger. The rifle fired. The recoil punched his shoulder. The gas system worked. He heard the bolt cycle, a metallic clack as the piston drove it back. The spent casing ejected. A new round chambered. The rifle fired again. Boom, clack, boom, clack, boom. 5 rounds in 2.1 seconds. The rifle kicked like a mule. The barrel heated fast. But it worked. Tony stood there, smoke curling from the barrel, his ears ringing. He had just turned a bolt-action rifle into something resembling a semi-automatic. It should not have worked. But it did. Now he just had to use it without getting caught. March 14th, 4:30 in the morning, intelligence reported 5 German spotters in a farmhouse 600 yards beyond the wire. The spotters had called in 3 artillery strikes overnight, killing 6 Americans and wounding 11 more. Tony volunteered for the patrol. Lieutenant Shaw approved without looking up from his map. 1 target Romano, then displace. Yes, sir. Tony crawled through the wire at 4:15. The ground was cold and wet, mud soaked through his uniform. He moved slowly, painfully slowly, using every ditch and shell crater for cover. The air smelled like wet soil and distant smoke. It took 40 minutes to cover 150 yards. His knees ached. His hands were numb. But he reached a collapsed stone wall 50 yards from the farmhouse and stopped. Caught his breath. Through the scope, he could see the farmhouse window. 5 shapes, German spotters dressed in field gray, hunched over radios and map tables. One of them held binoculars scanning the American lines. Another spoke into a radio handset, his mouth moving as he relayed coordinates. Tony's heart hammered in his chest, not from fear, from anticipation, from knowing that the next 30 seconds would either validate 3 months of thinking or prove him spectacularly wrong. He pulled the first mine. No, not a mine. A rifle, his modified Springfield. The weight felt different now, heavier by 0.4 pounds from the piston system. He adjusted his breathing, slowed his heartbeat. The crosshairs settled on the first spotter's chest. 600 yards, no wind, clear shot, 5 targets. Standard doctrine said take the one with the binoculars first, then displace before the others reacted. But if his modification worked, he could take all 5 before they understood what was happening. He thought about Sammy, about 47 men saved, about Cooper and Garrett and Richie, about all the men who had died because American snipers needed 4 seconds to cycle a bolt. He thought about Uncle Sal. Fix what's broken. Tony pulled the trigger. The rifle fired. The first spotter jerked backward. The binoculars falling from his hands. The gas system cycled. Clack. The bolt opened. The spent casing ejected. A new round chambered. The rifle fired again. Automatic. The second spotter's head snapped back. Clack. The third spotter collapsed across the map table. Clack. The fourth spotter spun and fell. Clack. The fifth spotter dropped. The radio handset slipping from his grip. 5 shots. 2.3 seconds. The German spotters died before the sound of the first shot reached them. They had no time to shout a warning, no time to grab their weapons, no time to understand what was happening. One moment they were alive, the next they were not. Tony cycled the bolt manually to eject the 5th casing. The barrel was hot against his hand. Smoke drifted from the muzzle. He scanned the window through the scope. No movement. 5 bodies sprawled across the floor and furniture. He waited. 10 seconds. 20. No reaction from inside the farmhouse. No German soldiers rushing to investigate. No return fire. He crawled backward out of the crater, dragging the rifle with him. 50 yards, 100. He reached the wire and slipped through, made it back to his foxhole as the sun broke over the hills. Nobody had heard the shots. The distant rumble of artillery had covered the sound. Nobody knew what he had done, except the German spotters were dead, all 5 of them. And for the first time in 7 weeks, the American lines did not get shelled at dawn. Tony sat in his foxhole, cleaning the rifle. The barrel was still warm. He ran a patch through it, watching black residue come out on the cloth. The modification had worked. The gas system had not blown up in his face. The rifle had cycled 5 times without jamming. He felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a dull awareness that he had killed 5 men in 2 seconds using a weapon that should not exist. And somewhere in his pocket, Sammy Cohen's half-written letter reminded him why. 47 men saved. 48 now. How many more before this war ended, Tony did not know. But he knew one thing: he had fixed what was broken, even if it cost him everything. Corporal Frank Delgado appeared at the edge of Tony's foxhole at 8:30 that morning. 30 years old. From the Bronx, scar across his chin from a bar fight in Sicily. He stared at Tony for a long moment before climbing down. "You took out that spotter nest," Delgado said. Tony did not look up from cleaning his rifle. "Yeah. All 5 spotters." "Yeah. In one go." "Yeah." Delgado sat down, looked at the rifle, then at Tony. His eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, with understanding. How Tony kept cleaning, ran the patch through the barrel one more time. "Trade secret." "Romano," Delgado's voice dropped. "We've been getting shelled by those spotters for 3 days. You just killed all 5 before they could scatter. How the hell did you do that?" Tony set the rifle down, looked at him, really looked at him, saw a man who had watched too many friends die. Same as everyone else at Anzio. Same as Tony. "You really want to know?" "Yeah. It's not regulation." "I don't care," Tony explained. The gas port, the piston system, the modified trigger group. How he had turned a bolt-action rifle into something that could fire 5 rounds in 2 seconds. Delgado listened without interrupting. When Tony finished, Delgado was quiet for a long moment. "You drilled a hole in a government rifle." "Yeah." "Modified the trigger." "Yeah. That's destruction of military property." "I know. If Shaw finds out you're looking at court-martial." "I know." Delgado picked up the rifle, examined the gas tube wrapped along the barrel, tested the bolt action, set it down carefully. "Does it work every time?" "Worked this morning." "How many rounds?" 5, that's the magazine capacity. Delgado nodded slowly. 5 rounds in 2 seconds. Jesus Christ, Romano. You built a machine gun out of a Springfield. Not a machine gun, semi-automatic. Still have to aim. Still, Delgado stood. 5 spotters in one sweep. That's illegal. That's brilliant. He left the foxhole. By noon, 3 other snipers had visited Tony's position. By evening, word had spread through the scout platoon. Nobody told Lieutenant Shaw. Nobody wrote a report. But snipers started asking questions, detailed questions. How deep was the gas port? What diameter? How did you attach the piston? Tony answered reluctantly. He did not want credit. He did not want attention. He wanted men to stop dying because German spotters had 4 seconds to run. On March 16th, a sniper named Jack Murphy came back from a mission with 3 confirmed kills. Murphy was 28, Irish, from Boston, red hair and a temper to match. He had known Sammy Cohen, had played cards with him 2 nights before the aid station got hit. Murphy found Tony in the chow line. Used your technique, Murphy said. Quiet, so nobody else would hear. 3 spotters in a church steeple. Took them out before they knew I was there. Tony stopped moving. You modified your rifle. Yeah, followed your design, worked perfectly. Murphy's face was unreadable. No displacement, no counterfire, just 3 dead spotters and me walking back. If you get caught, I know the risks, Romano, so do you. Murphy leaned closer. How many Americans died yesterday? I don't know. 4, down from 11 the day before, down from 18 the day before that. You know why? Tony said nothing. Because German spotters are dying faster than they can be replaced. Because snipers like me are using your technique. Because for the first time in 7 weeks, we're winning. Murphy walked away. By March 20th, 8 snipers at Anzio had modified their rifles. They did not ask permission. They worked at night using borrowed tools and scavenged materials. The modifications were crude. Some used copper tubing instead of steel. Others filed down springs that did not quite fit. But they worked. 5-round bursts instead of single shots. Spotter nests wiped out in seconds. The German artillery began to slow. Not stopped, not silenced, but slowed enough that men noticed. The casualty rate dropped, 38% in February, 29% in late March. 11 men saved for every 100 engaged. The math was starting to change. Obergefreiter Klaus Weber was 24 years old, from Stuttgart, married to a woman named Anna who worked in a bakery and wrote him letters that smelled like cinnamon and hope. Klaus had been a forward observer for 6 months, good at his job, precise, methodical, took pride in his accuracy, every coordinate perfect, every shell counting toward ending this war so he could go home to Anna. On the evening of March 13th, Klaus sat in a farmhouse room writing a letter by candlelight. Different farmhouse from the one Tony would target the next morning. But same job, same routine, same war. Liebste Anna, he wrote in careful script. The work here is tedious but safe. I call coordinates the artillery fires I move to the next position. The Americans have snipers, but they are slow. Always time to relocate after the first shot. Some men find this boring. I find it reassuring. Boring means I survive. Boring means I come home to you. He paused, thought about what else to say. How to tell her he missed the smell of fresh bread without sounding weak. How to say he was tired without worrying her. A voice called from the next room. Weber, your shift. Klaus folded the letter, put it in his pocket, never finished it. March 14th, 4:47 in the morning. Klaus was repositioned to a farmhouse 600 yards from American lines. 5-man spotter team. Klaus and 4 others. Standard deployment. Standard safety in numbers. Klaus sat at the radio, calling coordinates for the morning barrage. He saw movement in the American lines through his binoculars. Spoke into the handset. Coordinates echo 739-24. Enemy infantry assembling at... He never finished the sentence. Tony's bullet hit Klaus in the chest. The second shot. Klaus did not hear the first. Did not see his teammate fall. One moment he was calling to coordinates. The next moment there was nothing. Darkness, silence. Anna Weber in Stuttgart would receive a letter 3 weeks later. Regret to inform you that your husband, Obergefreiter Klaus Weber, was killed in action on March 14th, 1944. He served with honor and distinction. She would never know how Klaus died. Never know about the American sniper with the modified rifle. Never know that Klaus died mid-sentence calling artillery fire on men who were just trying to survive. Just as Tony would never know about Anna, about the unfinished letter in Klaus's pocket, about the bakery in Stuttgart that smelled like cinnamon. War had no room for those details. War only counted bodies and victories and the slow grinding math of who died and who lived to fight another day. 30 minutes after Klaus died, a German patrol found the farmhouse. 5 bodies, all dead. Radio still transmitting static. No evidence of an assault. No grenade fragments. No spent rifle casings nearby. No signs of close combat. Just 5 men in silence. One of the patrol members found Klaus's letter. Blood-stained, unfinished. He folded it carefully, put it with Klaus's personal effects to be sent home. The patrol leader filed a report. 5 forward observers killed, single American sniper suspected, method unknown, speed of engagement inconsistent with known American doctrine. The report worked its way up the chain of command, reached German intelligence within a week. They began comparing it to other reports, finding patterns. March 16th, church steeple, 3 observers killed, single American sniper, no warning given to other positions. March 18th, farmhouse ruins, 4 observers killed, single shooter, survivor reported multiple shots in rapid succession, thought it was a machine gun. March 20th, mill building, 5 observers killed, pattern identical to previous incidents. By March 24th, German intelligence had documented 17 forward observer deaths in 10 days, all following the same pattern. American snipers firing multiple shots rapidly, faster than bolt-action rifles should allow. They interrogated survivors, the few who had managed to escape. A German sergeant pulled from the line after his spotter team was ambushed, sat across from an intelligence officer in a cold room behind the lines. "Describe what happened," the officer said. The sergeant's hands shook. "The American fired 5 times before my partner could shout a warning. I saw the muzzle flash once. I heard 5 shots. They came so fast I thought it was a machine gun. But it was a rifleman. 1 man, 1 rifle, 5 of my team dead. Americans use bolt-action rifles. You know this." "I know what I heard." The intelligence officer made notes, filed the report, sent it to command. German commanders read the reports, discussed the implications, reached a conclusion. The Americans had developed something new, some kind of rapid-fire technique, some innovation that allowed single snipers to engage multiple targets before defensive measures could be taken. The solution was simple: change the doctrine. Forward observers would work alone now, not in groups. They would change positions every 30 minutes instead of every hour. They would avoid obvious vantage points. Church steeples, farmhouse windows, anywhere an American sniper might predict and target. The adjustments helped, but not enough. American snipers kept killing them, kept adapting, kept winning the small battles that added up to something larger. The artillery support dropped. German infantry, deprived of accurate fire direction, became more cautious, moved slower, took fewer risks. By April, the tactical balance at Anzio had shifted, not dramatically, not enough to break the stalemate, but enough that American infantry could move during daylight without drawing immediate artillery fire. Enough that casualty rates stayed below 30% instead of climbing higher. And still no official report mentioned modified rifles or unauthorized modifications. The snipers kept their secret. They communicated through whispered conversations and shared tools. They taught each other the technique in the dark hours before dawn. "Drill here, file this, adjust that spring." Lieutenant Shaw never noticed. Or if he did, he said nothing. He watched his casualty numbers drop and assumed it was better training, better luck, better something he did not need to question too closely. Sometimes you did not ask questions when the answers might force you to act against your own interest. On May 3, 1944, Captain William Hayes arrived at Anzio to inspect weapons. Ordnance Department, routine inspection. Nothing unusual, just a captain doing his job, checking rifles for wear and corrosion and unauthorized modifications. He moved from foxhole to foxhole, picked up Springfields, examined them, nodded, moved on, until he picked up Frank Delgado's rifle. Hayes examined the barrel, saw the wide tube wrapped along its length, frowned. "What's this?" Delgado hesitated. "Field modification, sir." "I can see that. Who authorized it?" "Nobody, sir." Hayes's face changed, went from curious to angry in the space between heartbeats. He disassembled the rifle in 30 seconds. Expert hands, years of training, saw the gas port drilled into the barrel, the piston mechanism, the modified trigger group. His face turned red. "This rifle has been illegally altered." Delgado said nothing. "Who did this?" Silence. "Corporal, I asked you a question." Delgado met his eyes. "I did it, sir." "You drilled a hole in a government rifle." "Yes, sir." "Do you understand that's destruction of military property?" "Yes, sir." "Who taught you how to do this?" Delgado's jaw tightened. "Figured it out myself, sir." Hayes did not believe him, but he moved on. Inspected 6 more rifles that day, found the same modifications on all of them. Same gas port placement, same piston design, same trigger adjustments. Someone had taught this technique. Someone had started it. And Hayes was going to find out who. He filed a report that evening. Sent it to Colonel Frank Morrison, the senior ordnance officer at the beachhead. Morrison read the report. Read it again. Called in his sergeant major. Tom Briggs, 40 years old, had seen 3 wars and more stupidity than any man should have to witness. "We have unauthorized weapon modifications," Morrison said. "Multiple snipers. Same system. Gas-operated conversion of bolt-action rifles." Briggs nodded. "I've heard about it, sir." Morrison looked up sharply. "You've heard and didn't report it." "Didn't think it was my place, sir." "It's your place if soldiers are destroying government property." Briggs shifted his weight, chose his words carefully. "Sir, the modifications work. Casualty rates down 11% since March. Spotters aren't calling in fire like they used to." Morrison stared at him. "Are you telling me these illegal modifications are effective?" "Yes, sir." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood. "I want an investigation. I want names. I want to know who started this, who taught it, who authorized it." The investigation took 3 days. Every sniper was interviewed. Every modified rifle was documented. Every man was asked the same questions. "Who modified your rifle? Where did you learn the technique? Who authorized this?" And every man gave the same answer. "I modified my own rifle. Figured it out myself. Nobody authorized it." The code of silence held, not because anyone ordered it, but because the snipers understood something Morrison did not. They had all broken the rules. They had all saved lives, and they were all going to protect the man who had shown them how. When you share a secret that keeps men alive, you do not give it up easily, not to captains, not to colonels, not to anyone who might take it away. On May 8th, Colonel Morrison called a meeting. Lieutenant Shaw in the scout platoon. 12 snipers standing in a supply tent, rifles at their sides. Tony stood in the back, saying nothing. Morrison held up one of the modified rifles. "This weapon has been altered in violation of Army regulations. Whoever is responsible for these modifications is subject to court-martial for destruction of government property." The tent was silent, men barely breathing. Morrison set the rifle down. "However," he paused, "let the word hang in the air. These modifications have proven tactically effective. The casualty rate at this beachhead has dropped 11% over the past 6 weeks. Artillery fire has decreased. Enemy spotters have been neutralized more efficiently than at any point since we landed." Another pause. "I am ordering an engineering evaluation of these modifications. If the evaluation confirms they are safe and effective, I will recommend official adoption. Until then, any soldier caught modifying a weapon without authorization will face disciplinary action. Are we clear?" Silence. Then a few quiet voices. "Yes, sir." Morrison left. The snipers stood there, unsure whether they had just been threatened or praised, unsure what came next. Lieutenant Shaw stayed behind. He walked to the back of the tent, where Tony stood. "Romano." "Sir." Shaw's voice was quiet. Only Tony could hear. "You started this." "Sir, I don't lie to me. I'm not an idiot. You're the only sniper in this platoon with mechanical experience. You grew up fixing engines. You modified your rifle, and the others copied you." Tony said nothing. Shaw stepped closer. I should court-martial you, but I won't. You know why, Byanta? No, sir. Because you saved lives. Ricci, Cooper, Garrett, Cohen. All those men died because we couldn't kill spotters fast enough. You fixed that problem, illegally, recklessly. But you fixed it. He paused. The engineering evaluation will take 6 weeks. If it comes back positive, you'll be reassigned to a training unit to teach this technique. If it comes back negative, you'll face court-martial. Understand? Yes, sir. Until then, keep your head down. Don't modify any more rifles. Don't teach anyone else. And for God's sake, don't talk to any reporters. Yes, sir. Shaw turned to leave, then stopped. Look back. Your friend Cohen, he'd be proud. Tony's throat tightened. He nodded once, could not trust his voice. Shaw left. Tony stood alone in the tent, felt the weight of what was coming. 6 weeks until his future was decided. 6 weeks until the Army determined whether his innovation was genius or treason. 6 weeks until they decided whether to promote him or hang him. He thought about Sammy, about the half-written letter still in his pocket, about 47 men saved, about whether any of it had been worth the price he was about to pay. He did not know, but he knew one thing: he would do it again, every time, without hesitation, because some things mattered more than regulations, more than careers, more than staying safe. Keeping men alive mattered, and if the Army wanted to court-martial him for that, then so be it. Tony Romano had fixed what was broken. Now he would face whatever came next. Late May 1944, a team from Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland arrived at Anzio. 3 engineers, 2 ballistics specialists, 1 ordnance expert. They collected 3 modified rifles from the scout platoon, tagged them, crated them, shipped them back to the United States for testing. Tony's rifle was not among them. He watched the crates being loaded onto a transport truck and felt nothing. No relief, no anxiety, just the hollow awareness that his future was being decided by men in laboratories who had never watched friends die because they followed doctrine. The engineers would fire 500 rounds through each rifle. They would measure gas pressure and bolt velocity and barrel stress. They would write reports in technical language that had no room for Sammy Cohen's gap-toothed smile or the smell of cordite in a shell crater at dawn. They would reduce innovation born from desperation into numbers on a page. And based on those numbers, Tony would either be celebrated or destroyed. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, June through July 1944. Dr. Robert Chen led the evaluation team, 38 years old, Chinese-American, MIT doctorate in mechanical engineering. He had spent 3 years designing weapons for the Army and had learned that most innovations came from the field, not the laboratory. Soldiers saw problems engineers could only theorize about. The modified Springfield rifles arrived on June 2nd. Dr. Chen unpacked them personally, examined each modification, traced the gas port with his finger, tested the piston movement, studied the trigger group adjustments. Whoever built these understood gas dynamics better than half my team, he said to his assistant. The testing began June 5th. 500 rounds through rifle number 1, measuring gas pressure at the port, bolt velocity during cycling, barrel stress under sustained fire, trigger timing consistency. The rifle functioned without a single malfunction. Rate of fire increased 300%, 1.2 rounds per second versus 0.3 rounds per second for standard bolt action. Accuracy maintained within 2 minutes of angle at 600 yards. Rifle number 2, same results. Rifle number 3, same results. Dr. Chen's team moved to stress testing. They wanted to know when the modifications would fail, when the barrel would crack, when the gas system would seize, when the trigger would misfire. They fired rifle number 1 continuously, one magazine after another, tracking each round, watching temperatures rise, waiting for catastrophic failure. At round 1,247, the barrel overheated. Metal stress caused a hairline crack near the gas port. The rifle stopped functioning, but it did not explode, did not fragment, just stopped working in a predictable, manageable way. Rifle number 2 failed at round 1,189. Pistons seized from carbon fouling, needed cleaning, not destruction. Rifle number 3 lasted until round 1,356. Trigger spring broke from metal fatigue. Dr. Chen compiled the data, wrote his analysis. The modifications reduced barrel life by approximately 15% due to increased thermal stress. But given the tactical advantage, that trade-off was acceptable. Standard Springfield barrels lasted 10,000 rounds. Modified barrels would last 8,500, still more than enough for combat operations. The trigger modification was the only serious concern, risk of slam fire if spring tension drifted. But with proper manufacturing specifications and trained armorers, that risk could be managed. Dr. Chen finished his report on July 28th, 47 pages, charts and graphs and technical specifications. The conclusion was 3 paragraphs. Gas-operated modification increases rate of fire approximately 300% without compromising accuracy or safety. Barrel life reduced estimated 15% due to increased thermal stress. Trigger mechanism requires careful adjustment to prevent slam fires. Recommend controlled implementation with standardized manufacturing specifications. The report sat on desks in Washington for 6 weeks, reviewed by the Ordnance Department, the Infantry Board, the Chief of Staff's office. Generals who had never fired a rifle in combat debated whether innovation from a Brooklyn mechanic should become official doctrine. Arguments against. It violated the Springfield's design philosophy, created maintenance burdens, set a precedent for unauthorized modifications that could spiral out of control. Arguments for. It saved lives, proven effective in combat. The enemy had already adapted their tactics in response, meaning the innovation was tactically significant, whether the Army officially recognized it or not. On August 12, 1944, the War Department issued Technical Manual 1905A. Field modification of M1903 Springfield rifle for gas-operated, semi-automatic function. Detailed instructions, diagrams, tolerances. Authorization for trained armorers to perform the modification under supervision. The manual included everything except one critical detail. It did not mention Tony Romano, did not mention Anzio, did not credit any individual soldier with the innovation. The technique was attributed to field observations and engineering analysis, as if rifles modified themselves, as if genius sprouted from nowhere like weeds through concrete. By September, 200 rifles had been converted using official specifications. By November, 800. The modified Springfields were deployed to sniper units in Italy, France, and the Pacific. The technique became standard for scout sniper teams operating in high-casualty environments. Casualty rates among scout snipers dropped 14% compared to pre-modification rates. Conservative estimates credited the gas-operated Springfield with saving 340 American lives between August 1944 and May 1945. 340 men who went home, who saw their families again, who lived because Tony Romano broke the rules. His name appeared nowhere in the official record. December 15, 1944. Fort Benning, Georgia. Tony had been reassigned in October, pulled from combat, sent to the Infantry Training Center to teach marksmanship and weapon maintenance. 6 months of instructing men who would never know what he had created. Who would read about the gas-operated modification in technical manuals and assume it came from engineers in laboratories? He never corrected them, never mentioned Anzio or Sammy Cohen or the night he drilled a hole in a government rifle at 2:30 in the morning. When trainees asked about rapid-fire techniques, he told them to refer to the manual. That was all. On December 15th, Tony received orders to report to the Judge Advocate General's office. He walked across the parade ground. Springfield slung over his shoulder. A different rifle now, unmodified, standard issue. His original had been confiscated for the evaluation and never returned. The JAG office was a small building near the base headquarters. Captain Morris sat behind a desk covered in paperwork, gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Corporal." Tony sat. Morris opened a file. Corporal Anthony Romano. Service number 3, 2158847. Scout Sniper 5th Arm Anzio Beach Head. He read from the file, voice flat, professional. You modified a government rifle without authorization in March 1944. Correct. Yes, sir. You understand that's destruction of military property? Yes, sir. You drilled a hole in the barrel, altered the trigger mechanism, fabricated unauthorized components. Yes, sir. Morris closed the file, looked at Tony. Why? Tony met his eyes. Men were dying, sir. German spotters were calling in artillery faster than we could kill them. Standard doctrine was not working. I thought I could fix it. And you did not ask permission. I knew what the answer would be, sir. So you violated regulations? Yes, sir. Morris leaned back in his chair. Long pause, then he spoke again. Your modification has been officially adopted. 800 rifles converted, 14% reduction in casualties, 340 lives saved. Another pause. You should receive a medal. Tony said nothing. Morris picked up another paper. Recommendation from Colonel Morrison is court-martial. Dishonorable discharge, 6 months confinement. Tony's hands tightened on the arms of the chair. He kept his face neutral, said nothing. Evidence is clear, Morris continued. You admit to all charges. Witnesses confirm you taught modification technique to other snipers. Technical analysis confirms barrel drilling, trigger modification, unauthorized components. He set the paper down, picked up a stack of letters. However, Chief of Staff's office has reviewed your case. They asked me to read you something. Morris opened the first letter. Dear JAG Office, I am writing about Corporal Romano. I do not know him personally, but I know I am alive because his modification killed German spotters before they could call artillery on my position. My daughter turns 3 next month. I get to see her because of Corporal Romano. If you court-martial a man for saving my life, I will testify on his behalf. I will bring 50 other soldiers who lived because of him. We will make sure every newspaper in America knows the Army punishes men for keeping us alive. Respectfully, Private James Morrison, 1st Infantry Division. Morris set the letter down. 11 more just like it. He looked at Tony. Chief of Staff's office has decided that prosecution would create negative publicity. A soldier court-martialed for saving lives does not play well in the press. Creates questions about Army judgment, about who we punish and why. Morris pulled out another sheet. Official letterhead. You are being reassigned to a rear echelon logistics unit. No combat duty, no training duty, no public recognition. You will serve out your enlistment processing supply requisitions in a warehouse. Pause. Sir, I did not do this for recognition, Tony said. Then you will not miss it. Morris stood. Consider yourself lucky, Corporal. You violated regulations and you are walking away without a court-martial. That is more than most soldiers get. Dismissed. Tony left the office. Felt nothing, not relief, not anger, just hollow awareness. He had saved 340 lives, and his reward was exile, buried in a warehouse, erased from the story, made invisible. He thought about Sammy Cohen, about 47 men saved, about a half-written letter that ended mid-sentence. Sammy had wanted to save people, had dreamed of medical school and a practice in Boston where he could fix people instead of patching them up to die. Tony had wanted the same thing, to fix what was broken, to keep men alive. They had both succeeded. They had both been forgotten. Maybe that was how it always worked. The men who saved lives never got remembered. Only the men who took them. If you are over 60 and you remember the end of World War II, you probably remember the celebrations. VE Day, VJ Day, parades and ticker tape and soldiers coming home. But you might also remember the other stories, the quieter ones. The men who came back changed, who never talked about what they did, who carried secrets they would take to their graves. Many of you watching had fathers or grandfathers like that. Men who served, who did their duty, who came home and went back to ordinary lives without fanfare or recognition. This is one of those stories. And if it sounds familiar, if it reminds you of someone you knew, please share that memory in the comments. These stories matter. These men matter. Even when history forgets them. Tony was reassigned to a supply depot in Norfolk, Virginia in January 1945. He spent 7 months stamping forms and counting inventory. Warehouse duty, the Army's way of making him disappear without officially punishing him. He never modified another rifle, never taught another class, never spoke about Anzio or gas ports or the night he built something that should not exist. The war ended in May. Victory in Europe. Tony processed supply requisitions. No celebration. August. Victory over Japan. Tony counted boots and helmets and rifles in a warehouse that smelled like cardboard and old metal. He was discharged August 15th, 1945. Returned to Brooklyn with a duffel bag and a train ticket and no ceremony. No parade, no recognition. Just another veteran coming home to a country that was already moving on. The gas-operated Springfield remained in use through the end of the war. After the war, the Army phased out the Springfield in favor of the M1 Garand, which was already semi-automatic. Tony's modification became obsolete, but the principle did not. The idea that field soldiers could identify problems and innovate solutions. That became part of Army doctrine. The Infantry Board established a formal process for evaluating field modifications. That process still exists today. Tony Romano went back to Red Hook, back to Uncle Sal's garage, back to fixing car engines and living a life that looked nothing like the one he had lived at Anzio. He married Grace Moretti in 1947. Neighborhood girl, worked in a bakery. They had two sons, Michael in 1948, Vincent Jr. in 1951. Tony never talked about the war. When people asked, he said he was a sniper, did his job, came home, that was all. He never mentioned the modification, never mentioned 340 lives, never mentioned Sammy Cohen or Klaus Weber or the mathematics of innovation born from grief. He opened his own auto repair shop in 1952. Romano Brothers Garage. The business thrived. People brought him cars other mechanics could not fix, engines that made strange noises, transmissions that failed in ways the manuals did not cover. Tony would listen to the engine, close his eyes, hear the rhythm, understand what was broken. Then he would fix it. His sons worked in the garage with him, learned to diagnose problems by sound. Learned that if something was broken, you understood why, for you touched it. Don't just replace parts, Tony told them. Understand the system, understand why it failed, then fix what's actually broken, not what you think is broken. The same philosophy that had turned a bolt-action rifle into something that saved 340 lives. Applied now to carburetors and timing chains and the small mechanical problems of people who just wanted their cars to run. Michael asked once when he was 17, "Dad, were you good at shooting in the war?" Tony was under a Chevrolet replacing an oil pan. "Good enough. War's over. Focus on what matters now." "But did you do anything important?" Tony slid out from under the car, looked at his son, saw a kid who wanted his father to be a hero, who wanted stories about bravery and medals and glory. Tony could have told him, could have explained about gas ports and piston systems and 5 shots in 2 seconds. Could have said that 340 men went home because of what he built in a supply tent at 2:30 in the morning. Instead, he said, "Everyone did something important. That's why we won. Now hand me that socket wrench." Michael never asked again. In 1987, a military historian named Dr. Raymond Cook published a paper, Field Innovation in the European Theater, Unauthorized Modifications and Tactical Effectiveness. The paper was 40 pages long, published in the Journal of Military History. Readership of maybe 200 people, mostly academics who studied warfare from the safety of university libraries. 3 paragraphs mentioned the West-operated Springfield modification, noted that it originated at Anzio in March 1944, credited it to field observations by an unidentified scout sniper from the Fifth Army. No name, no details, just a footnote in a paper almost nobody read. Tony was 65 when that paper was published, retired from the garage, watching his granddaughter play in the backyard, thinking about whether to plant tomatoes that summer. He never saw the paper. Never knew someone had written about his innovation. Never knew he had been reduced to unidentified scout sniper in a footnote that almost nobody would ever read. He died 4 years later, July 12, 1991. Lung cancer, 69 years old. Spent too many years breathing exhaust fumes in garages that did not have proper ventilation. His wife Grace was there, his sons Michael and Vincent Jr., 5 grandchildren, a small funeral, family and a few customers from the garage. No military honors. Tony had never applied for them, never wanted them. He was buried in Calvary Cemetery in Queens. Simple headstone. Anthony Romano, 1922 to 1991. Beloved father and husband. Nothing about the war, nothing about innovation, nothing about 340 lives saved. Grace chose the inscription. He never wanted recognition, she said to her sons. He just wanted to come home and be a father. That's what mattered to him. They did not argue. They buried him on a Tuesday morning and under gray skies that looked like they might rain, but never did. 12 years later, in March 2003, a historian named Dr. Sarah Mitchell was cataloging World War II maintenance logs at the Army Heritage and Education Center in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. She was 32, doctorate in military history from Georgetown, spent her days in archives reading documents most people had forgotten existed. She found a maintenance log from Anzio dated March 1944. 12 rifles listed as non-regulation modifications gas operation. One entry caught her attention. Rifle assigned to Corporal Anthony Romano, serial number 3-2158847. She cross-referenced the name with service records. Found Anthony Romano, Brooklyn, New York. Scout sniper. Deployed to North Africa, Sicily, Anzio. Reassignment to Fort Benning, October 1944. Discharged August 1945. Honorable. No medals, no commendations. Just a standard service record for a soldier who did his job and came home. She searched for a death certificate, found it. Anthony Romano died July 12, 1991. Lung cancer. Dr. Mitchell spent 3 months researching, reading after action reports from Anzio, interviewing veterans who had served in scout platoons, piecing together a story that had been deliberately erased. She wrote an article, The Silence Wave Shot, How a Brooklyn Mechanic Changed Sniper Doctrine at Anzio, published in Army History Journal, spring 2004. 8 pages. Detailed the Anzio conditions, the modification process, the 340 lives saved, the post-war erasure. 500 copies printed, distributed to military historians and veterans organizations. Never reached the general public. No mainstream media picked it up, but it reached Vincent Romano Jr. in Portland, Oregon. Vincent was 53 when he got the article in the mail. Dr. Mitchell had tracked him down, called him, asked if he knew about his father's innovation. My father worked in a garage, Vincent said. Fixed cars, never talked about combat. Mr. Romano, your father may have saved 340 American lives with an innovation he created. I would like to send you what I found. Vincent received the article by mail, read it 3 times, could not reconcile the man in the article with the father he remembered. The father who never talked about the war, who changed the subject when anyone asked, who seemed determined to be ordinary. Vincent called his sister in Florida. She did not believe it. Dad fixed cars. You are confusing him with someone else. But Vincent knew it was true. He recognized something in the details. The way the article described his father's mechanical thinking, the way he understood systems, the way he fixed things by understanding why they were broken. In the summer of 2004, Vincent drove from Portland to New York, stood at his father's grave in Calvary Cemetery. Simple headstone, Anthony Romano, 1922 to 1991, beloved father and husband. Vincent held Dr. Mitchell's article in his hands, looked at the grave, thought about all the times he had asked his father about the war, about all the times his father had deflected, had changed the subject, had made it clear that whatever happened over there was staying over there. Vincent thought about adding a plaque, updating the headstone, adding something about the war, about innovation, about 340 lives. But then he thought about his father's life after the war. 46 years in a garage, teaching his sons to fix engines, never once mentioning what he had done in Italy, never seeking recognition, never wanting it. Who was Vincent to change that now? He left the article on the headstone. Wind blew it away, watched it tumble across the cemetery grass. It felt right somehow. His father had spent a lifetime making sure nobody knew, making sure the story died with him, making sure he could just be a mechanic from Brooklyn who fixed cars and raised his kids and lived an ordinary life. Vincent got back in his car, drove to the airport, flew home to Portland, never told anyone outside the family about the article, never sought publicity, never tried to get his father recognized, because he finally understood. His father had not wanted to be remembered for killing 5 men in 2 seconds. He had wanted to be remembered for the life he built after, for the sons he raised, for the cars he fixed, for the ordinary goodness of showing up and doing the work and going home to the people you loved. That was the legacy Tony Romano had chosen, and Vincent was not going to take it away from him. Fort Benning, Georgia, 2024. 80 years after Tony Romano drilled a gas port in a rifle barrel at Anzio, a modern sniper course, Instructor Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen, 28 years old, teaching a class on field modifications. Field modifications must be approved through proper channels, he tells the students. But history shows us that sometimes soldiers in combat see problems faster than committees. He projects an image on the screen. Technical Manual 9-1905A. One example, Anzio, 1944. A soldier modified a bolt-action Springfield into a semi-automatic using gas operation. Innovation saved an estimated 340 lives, set precedent for the field modification evaluation process we still use today. A student raises his hand. Who was the soldier, Sergeant? Chen checks his notes. Unknown. Record attributes it to field observations. Name was lost. The class moves on. Nobody questions it. History is full of unknown soldiers who did important things. One more does not matter, but the technique they are learning was born in a shell crater at Anzio, born from grief and anger and the desperate need to fix what was broken, born from a Brooklyn mechanic who understood that some things mattered more than regulations. The students do not know that. They just know the technique works. That is enough. Somewhere in Stuttgart, Germany, in a cemetery near a bakery that closed 20 years ago, there is a headstone for Obergefreiter Klaus Weber, 1920 to 1944. Beloved husband, Anna Weber died in 1996, 72 years old, never remarried, never knew how her husband died, never knew about Tony Romano or the rifle that killed Klaus in 2.3 seconds. She kept Klaus's unfinished letter in a drawer for 52 years, blood-stained, incomplete, a reminder of a life cut short by a war neither of them wanted. Two stories that intersected for less than 3 seconds on a cold March morning in Italy. Two men who never met, never spoke, never knew each other existed. One lived 47 more years, one did not. War is full of those intersections, brief moments where lives cross and change and end, the math of who survives and who does not, the brutal calculus that adds up to history. Some legacies are written in marble. Some are written in the names that did not appear on casualty lists. Anthony Romano's legacy is 340 men who went home, who saw their families, who lived long enough to grow old and tell their grandchildren about the war. They do not know Tony's name. They do not know about the modification or the court-martial threat or the exile to a warehouse in Norfolk. They just know they survived Anzio. That is enough. Tony never wanted recognition. He got none. His name appears in no official records of innovation, no medal citations, no training manuals, just a maintenance log from Anzio that a historian found 60 years too late, an article published 13 years after he died, and a headstone in Queens that says nothing about what he did. But somewhere right now, a 95-year-old man in Kansas is alive because German spotters died before they could call artillery on his position in March 1944. He does not know why he survived, does not know about gas ports or piston systems or a Brooklyn mechanic who broke every rule. He just knows he made it home, planted wheat, raised children, lived a good life. That is the only legacy Tony Romano ever wanted. Not recognition, not medals, not his name in history books, just men going home, just mothers who did not have to cry, just the quiet knowledge that he fixed what was broken even when it cost him everything to mine. Some heroes die loud. Tony Romano died the quietest of all, and 340 families never knew they should say thank you.